You're listening to the Communications Business Advisor podcast, the podcast for communications professionals in the corporate world who are committed to advancing their work and our field's reputation as critical business advisors that are not only invited to the decision-making table, but are required there. I'm your host, Tara McDonagh.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Communications Business Advisor podcast. I am your host, Tara McDonagh, and today we're going to be talking about comms and moms again. Yep, this is part 2 in a 2-part series, so if you haven't listened to part 1, you might want to check that out first, because I do reference it in our conversations here in part 2. And my approach on this one was a little different. I wanted to hear from all of you, and I wanted you all to be allowed to hear from one another. So I reached out to a few women that I know in the field, and I asked them if they had some insight to share on this topic, and I prodded them with a few questions, and the response I got was a bit overwhelming. Everybody wanted to participate. You are all fiery on this topic, and I love it. Appropriately fiery. So when I reached back out, I ended up deciding that I was going to interview the first person who reached back out, just because she was the first person who reached back out. And that I was going to also capture voices from all these other women too, because they had such good, rich thoughts, ideas, stories, perspectives to share with all of you. So we're sharing a whole lot of this stuff here from all of you. And I'm going to share that we didn't include names here. We did not include companies because I wanted to include candid conversations. I wanted people to be really open and honest and not have to worry about, what the companies were thinking or have people associate people with particular companies, because it's not about the company. It's about the women, and it's about the stuff that we all are dealing with, good and bad and ugly. And so we're going to start with an interview with one particular woman. Her name is Andrea. And so Andrea is a communications leader at a North American company, pretty big one. Let's call it, billions of dollars size company, and a pretty well-known brand. At least I knew the brand before I met her. And she's going to share her perspective first. A little later in the episode, you'll hear from multiple other women, and I encourage you to listen all the way through. And yes, even if you're a man, because there's really some good, rich stories about how to help support women, and you're not left out of the conversation. And also, if you're child-free, because we also talk about what we remember from being child-free and what that was like. And there's some stories here for you too, and some perspectives here for you too. So listen in, let me know what you think, and as always, keep advising. Andrea, we'll just call you Andrea. I really wanted to be able to have candid conversations, so we're not going to be identifying anybody in particular in this call. But I do want to cover this, broad topic, and I'm so grateful that you've agreed to join me here, about being a mom in the comms field, comms and moms. So we know each other pretty well, and I know some aspects of your journey to motherhood, which are quite similar to mine, like struggling with infertility and fertility treatments being both a blessing and a challenge that brought us to motherhood. But I don't know it all, and I definitely don't know about your transition into motherhood in the workplace from the before times, let's call them, to when you became a mom after. So let's start there. Tell me about your transition into motherhood at work. What was it like before you were a mom, and what was that transition like?
First of all, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm really excited to dig into this conversation. For me, I got into motherhood a little bit later in life. So I was after university, enjoying life, traveling, starting my career, loving it. Eventually ended up meeting my now husband, then partner, but we were late to getting married. I was, my mid-20s when I met him. We didn't get married till 35. And lo and behold, it wasn't easy to have babies, turns out. So
Ooh.
as you mentioned,
Samesies.
so we, like I said, married at 35 and didn't always know that I wanted to be a mom. So that was kind of interesting too. I could totally see a path where we would have a wonderful life with or without kids. Eventually came to that decision. So probably about 10 years into my career, I was a senior manager at the time. And then eventually we were blessed with two wonderful babies. So I have twins, little boy and a little girl.
Mm.
And yeah, it's been a ride.
So what was it like before you were a mom? Like, do you remember anything that I always talk about, the constant will she, won't she that I
Mhm.
felt from people? Is she going to be a mom? Is she going to become a parent? Is she not? Even with like job interviews, them like kind of looking at me sideways, looking for the ring, looking for like any sign. Will she be
Yeah.
out on maternity leave? Will she, you know, all of that stuff, plus the whole concept of, well, she's not married. So I think for me, the perception was always that I was younger than I was.
Mm.
I think in my last episode, I talked about like someone asking me if I went out clubbing the night before, which like, LOL, I've never been clubbing in my life. I did have a lot
I
of
still
fun.
like a good dance.
Um, this doesn't surprise me, but just lots of like judgment around like really a lot of like stupid interest in my reproductive,
Mm.
tendencies, and also how I looked at other moms, and now the conversation always seemed to be about mothers, never
Hmm.
about women,
Hmm.
which really bugged me. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I come at it a couple of different ways, actually. So I do remember being pre-kids. I remember I was in marketing at the time. I was very fortunate in my career to have a number of really strong female role models. And at the time, all of the directors on my marketing team were women and had kids.
Hmm.
So for me at the time, I had no idea what it meant to have kids. You don't know that lived
Yeah.
experience until you're in it, right? And
Hmm.
I'm sure there's lots of other lived experiences that I don't get either. But I remember really, really as a marketer being a bit ticked off that the world was revolving around moms. It felt like everything was targeted to moms. And I actually felt this sort of feeling of like, I'm a whole woman too, if I'm not a
Yeah.
mom. So there was that. And then I also, you notice, and now that I am a mom, I know this, the women who were directors, they would leave at a regular, consistent time to get home to be with their families. They wouldn't necessarily stop and have the lunch that I would have with my peers at the time.
Hmm.
And that's okay. I get it now. It's a busy time. You come to having two full-time jobs. You have a full-time job outside of the home and a full-time job in the home. But yeah, I definitely remember especially going through fertility challenges, words
Yeah.
matter. And asking people if when they're going to have a baby, when they're struggling to have a baby, is really hard. And
Oh
none of your
yeah.
business, frankly. So I'm open. I talk about that really openly now, but when I was going through it, it was really hard. So I
Yeah.
think we got to think about being more than just moms, and
Yeah.
also the world is more than just moms. So if you're not a mom, there's lots of ways to mother. There's lots of ways to be, hugely participant in your career in other pieces of motherhood. But I think the point I want to make is really, let's not typecast people, let's just be
Yes.
interested in who people are and what they bring.
I also found this natural kind of tendency to sort of, and I don't think it's women play into this as almost like as we don't even realize we're doing it because of systems that have set up for us, but almost
Mm,
in this like the mom and non and child free camp
mm,
where it's sort of like I've seen weaponization in both ways where, you know, I've heard, and again, I've said this in my last podcast, that a few moms have shared with me that they would never work for a woman who's not a mother because they quote unquote don't get it.
mm,
And they therefore can't possibly support it the way that they need to have supporting. And that's just a terrible typecast and
mm,
so unfair. And in the other direction, I've also had women who, for example, women that are fellow consultants say, tell me without knowing that I had a child, because apparently they don't follow my content, say things like, oh, well, when I'm pitching, I make sure that they know that I'm not going to be somebody that has to cancel meetings or be, working from home or something because my kid's sick because I don't have kids. And
mm.
I was like, as a parent to an elementary age kid, that's like, oh, dagger in the heart. You're just like, we're playing against each other here. Like, let's play together.
Yeah.
All of our experiences are valid. And I've also kind of had that experience of talking about how challenging it is for moms in particular in relation to things like return to the office and,
Mm,
mid-school year, for example, when you can't get school care or daycare or
right.
aftercare or whatever it is that you need because everything is full.
Right.
And you're talking about these things and this literally just happened to me recently where the response from another woman was, "Well, it's hard for me too."
Mm,
And then she went on and talked about like all of the reasons why it's hard for a woman without a child. And then she went into like political things like, I'll happily subsidize maternity leave for others, but I don't want to not be able to take time off myself. I was like, whoa, we missed the plot somewhere. Because when a woman starts talking about, the experience of being a mother and someone else says, me too, it kind of feels
mm,
a lot like gaslighting. I want to hear about the child-free experience. I mean, I was a child-free person until I was 39, so I get it. And I want to hear what it's like for them, but I also kind of don't want it to be a competition.
yeah.
And it's different when it feels a little bit like relational, where you're trying to kind of connect versus compete.
Right.
So that's a little tip there. It's my little high horse on that topic. And I just want us all to kind of recognize that this is something that I think systems and structures set up for us to compete with one another rather than support one another. And if we don't check it and notice it, we can easily participate in it without even recognizing it. Anything to add on that?
Yeah, I do. I have a few thoughts on that. I'll come back. I've had, as many comms leaders have, I've had a number of different bosses, many of which were amazing, many of which were women, many of which were men, many of which I learned from what don't want to do as a leader as well.
Yeah,
I
those are
think
blessings in their own way, right?
they are, right? They shape who you become as a leader. I think
Yeah.
learning is awesome, no matter where you get it. But I will say one of my favorite bosses was a female, very senior, and she didn't have kids and
Hmm.
she got it. So I think what I
Yeah.
say to that is there's both sides of the coin for everything, right? So she didn't understand the lived experience, but she was very supportive.
Yeah.
Um, I think the other piece that I would bring to the table, which is maybe a different thought, is when I started well, we didn't talk about this. We can come back to this. I came back from maternity leave to a new company and a new job. So
Oh,
I didn't
yeah. We
have
need to
to,
talk
yes,
about that.
we'll come back to that. So I didn't have that transition. But when I started at my company as a new mom, I
Hmm.
was a little concerned about, the mom casting. What does that mean? All the things you talked about. And where I got some of the most support, and I know this is not always the norm, but I watched senior men as parents and I watched them show up with confidence of saying, I'm going to go pick up my kid. Oh, I've got a call from the school. I'm going to be sick. Not, the kid's going to be sick.
Yes, please. More of that, men.
But what I did, because it wasn't common, this was, almost a decade ago, what I did was I reinforced that behavior. I had a person, I was on the leadership team at the time. I had a dear colleague say, actually the head of the leadership team, the president of the company, set a regular, I think it was like 7:30 or 8 a.m. meeting. And for anybody who's a parent knows that's a really
Hmm.
busy hour when you're trying to get
Yep.
kids ready, fed, out to school. And
Hmm.
the president at the time, who was a father, had stay-at-home care. And so I didn't think it was in his lived experience to be thinking like that. But this male colleague I had spoke up and said, you know what? That's not a great time for any of us on the leadership team that are parents. Can we move it? And we did. But at the time, like I say things like that all the time now because I'm more confident in my
Yeah.
kids. And now I'm confident in my motherhood. But at the time, that was a huge, huge win to see a man do that. And I went and said to him,
Yeah.
thanks, because I don't know that I would have done that at that stage in my career.
See, I have a similar anecdote to share. First of all, I love that. So I've encouraged every man that I know to listen to my podcast this month, focused on women,
Mm,
because we need male allies to succeed.
we
It's like,
do.
it's proven. And a lot of them want to be our allies. They just need to know how. And one way is
Yeah.
setting the great example, like you talked about. And another is like, if we feel like we we aren't able to say something for whatever reason, ask them to speak up because
Yep.
sometimes they'll be heard in a way that we're not, unfortunately, but it's true.
The message that I just want to reinforce there, because I think we need to do it more as women, is give them props for doing it. Because sometimes they don't
Oh,
even know that
fair.
they've done
Yeah.
something great. Like I've told them both the male president and the colleague that have, I've told them both, like, you have no idea as a leader how much that role modeled for women. It was
Oh,
very,
yeah. 100%. I mean, men get a bad rap, I think, a lot in this. And
mm,
just to be clear, I love men. Like, I'm married to a man who's lovely and wonderful, who has his flaws, but who's also lovely and wonderful. And I also, I have great clients who are men. I have great allies who are men. We all do. I'm also happy to tell a man when he's mansplaining or being
mhm,
part of the problem. And they
mhm.
need to hear that. We need to show that it's not okay. We also need to show what allyship does look
Yeah,
like.
for
And
sure.
so I'm 100% with you. Let's do more of those, like, thank you for saying that. I had an interesting experience similar to the one you had where I worked at a company. At the time, I didn't have a child.
Mhm,
And someone, I won't say who it was, a male leader on the team was speaking to a female leader, like maybe, a level below him, senior director
mhm,
level-ish. And she was talking about how hard it was to like connect with a particular leader at our company. And he told her, you got to come in at 5 in the morning. That's what I do. I get up and I come right into work. And that's when I catch all of the leaders right before they sign on because they're all working and that's when you get them they don't have the in the hallway time because they're all scheduled. So you get them while they're in their office ready to start the day. And I mean, I watched this and it was like steam was rolling out of her ears. And she said to him, somebody's got to get my kids to the bus every day.
mm,
And not all of us are blessed to have a wife at home who takes care
right.
of our kids because he did have, and she knew he had a
Yeah.
stay-at-home parent co-parenting with him where he could do that. And it was like his face turned red. He was embarrassed, but he said nothing. And he kept up with his same, I'm coming in at 5 in the morning to get the people that I need to get to, who, by the way, were all white men,
Mm,
to talk about the things that he needed to get movement on. And that then excluded those of us who couldn't, right?
mm.
Who couldn't participate in those, let's say 6 a.m. Let's not be psychos here.
Yeah, 5 a.m.
7 a.m. Conversations before the day started. And that same company was very much a fan of the 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning meetings.
Mm,
And if you couldn't be there, dial in. But we all know that at the time, pre-COVID, a dial in convo was very
yeah,
different.
awful.
You were forgotten. You were not in the room.
Sure.
So I had an opposite experience, but I do say to women in the Raise the Tide group, to clients that I deal with all over my content, that there are opportunities for us to grow in our careers. There are companies who are doing it right. There are places for us to grow in a corporate environment. And if you've had a bad experience where you've seen bad behavior, not all of them are out there like that. Like, one, you could try to attempt to change it, or you can just decide that's not the culture for you and move on.
Yeah, fully agree. I'm by no means do I not underestimate that I am currently at a company that is incredibly supportive.
Yeah,
It
I'm
has its
jealous
it
of your
has its
company.
faults, no question. We're not perfect, but I think there is a real drive to be supportive to women, to men, to a number of different,
Yeah.
elements of diversity, and that doesn't go underestimated. I do want to just go back quickly to we were talking about kind of competition and making sure we prop each other up versus compete against each other. One
Yep.
thing that I think, and I can be guilty of it, but I'm trying to be on a journey. I think we got to get over this stay-at-home mom, working mom competition. So
Oh,
when you
yeah,
show up
girl.
to the schoolyard and you got the stay-at-home mom and the working mom, we're all moms, we're all women. Let's just, put each other's crowns on. That's kind of my,
Yes.
my
What's
strive to
that?
be better.
The movie Bad Moms? It's like,
Yeah.
it's funny because it's true.
Yeah.
Like,
But why? Why?
so
We're all
bad.
moms. Bring it
Again,
in.
I'm going to say we don't hate the humans, we hate the system that
Yeah.
sets us up to compete with one another versus like be proud and excited for one another in whatever journey we choose to have.
And neither journey are easy. So here's another thing. I come from a family.
True
My
story.
sister, my sister was a career woman, made a decision to stay home with her kids for about a decade, and then got back into work. Wasn't easy to be a stay-at-home mom
No.
either. There are multiple challenges on both sides. So let's,
And return to work is
yeah,
significantly hard once you exit for whatever period of time, especially, you think that the jobs will be there when you come back, and that can be not true,
hard
which is
for
hard.
sure.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit about announcing your pregnancy at work.
Oh,
Or even like, I don't know if you had this experience. I had an experience of having a hard time trying to explain my doctor's appointments when
oh
I was
yeah.
having
Oh yeah.
fertility
This was
treatment.
fun. I at the time when I was going through fertility treatment, so anybody who's not gone through fertility treatments, you end up going to a clinic most days of the week, early in the morning.
Yep.
And the clinic that I was at was actually a big CPG company that my peers were at that I knew, given the role I was in the same building. So I was like, oh, cool. Am I going to run into somebody? But yes, it's always, I think it's changing. My kids are 9 now. So it was veiled in secrecy back then. You didn't talk about
Mhm.
fertility. I do all the time now. You didn't talk about pregnancies. P.S. The first 3 months when you're worried about, whether the baby's going to be safe and healthy are some of the sickest that you are. So I remember having to throw up in a garbage can at my desk. Like, we're making humans and women are throwing up in garbage cans because they're so sick and they're keeping it a secret. So, going back to it's tough. And I shared that the directors and my boss at the time were all moms. So I didn't have a lot of fear of sharing my pregnancy. I'd also been at the company for over a decade. So,
Yeah.
that experience for me was okay. But I will say, fast forward now, I have a team and three of them are moms. Two of them are not parents. And we have a very different relationship, I think, because of the my leadership style and what I like to culture in my team. We have had open conversations about when somebody's trying to get pregnant or having difficulties in their
Mhm.
pregnancy. And I think that's the type of culture that I am very aware isn't everywhere, but I think
Yeah.
that's the vision that I want to get us to, is how do we
Yeah.
support people when they are going through a really important life change?
Yeah. Can we, I mean, I don't know about you, but half the things that happened to you during pregnancy, even though I had gone through like 3 years of fertility treatments, I was like, wait, what? That happens when you're pregnant? Like
Yeah.
because we don't talk about this stuff. It's like apparently we're supposed to think, ew, gross, and it's not the case. Okay, so what ultimately happened? How did you end up at a different company?
Yeah, this is a good story. So like I said, I had been at my company probably a little more than a decade. I had no strong intentions of leaving the company, so I went off on maternity leave. Reference point in Canada, maternity leave's about a year. I am Canadian, so that's a year that you are up to 18 months actually that you can
All of
be.
the US people, by the way, are like, oh my God, another reason I need to move to Canada right now. Okay, keep going.
So like I said, I went off on maternity leave. I had all intention of coming back to the company that I was with, so much so that we bought a home that was very close to that company.
Mm.
And then lo and behold, I got an offer from a company that I'm at today that they were looking for somebody with my qualifications. So I went through with reminder, my twins are babies. I decided I would go through the interview process and ultimately was successful. So went back to a new company to a promotion, in at a director level, new company, new field, and had twin babies. So yeah,
Mm.
that was a big one. But
Yeah,
I will say that year was intense, not gonna sugarcoat that, but it was the best move I ever did. So
that's a great story. I mean, I know in Raise the Tide and in a couple of other women that I know in this field, one of the things that I love is to highlight the positive stories. Because I had a really challenging experience with having to make choices with my
mm,
career and becoming a mother, which, footnote here, if you didn't listen to the last episode, friends, you'll hear my full on vulnerable story and
mm.
the last episode of the podcast. But I'm also super proud of the women who have been able to move to Asia while 8 months pregnant and take new roles, and the women who I've helped in the program who have gotten raises and like additional flexibility or more time off when for their maternity leave or promoted while they were pregnant.
Hired while they're pregnant.
Yeah, this is the stuff where it's sort of like it's founded to be, it's proven that we can be fearful on this because it's founded, like there's
Yeah,
bias,
for
but
sure.
it's also proven that that's not the thing that doesn't have to hold us back, right? We can't control other people's circumstances or biases or whatever, but we can control where we go with our careers and our talent. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Tell me a little bit more about like what support were you given? How did you advocate for yourself in that first year? What's it like for you today? How old are your
Mm.
twins, by the way?
My twins are 9.
Yeah,
They're
that's fun.
amazing. It's a great age. For anybody who's in the thick of newborns and babies and toddlers and all of those things, it gets better.
Yeah.
Um, they're still cute, but I mean, the baby phase is super cute, but they're a lot easier now. But yeah, like I said, going back to a new job with young kids was incredibly hard. You talk about fears. I remember my husband gave me a digital photo frame so I could see my babies when I went back to work. I didn't put it on my desk for the same reason. I didn't want to be typecast. Fast forward now, I'd have that on my desk proudly. Ironically enough, in the world of hybrid working, I don't have a permanent desk anymore, but never mind.
Yeah, I had a woman tell me not to talk about my kid at work
Yeah.
and not, this is when I was pregnant and she was trying to be helpful. She was like,
Hmm.
don't talk about your child at work, don't put pictures up.
Mm.
And she was trying to be helpful, but I was kind of like, dude, you have no idea the amount of pain, agony. Like, I am just so glad that I have a child and now like I'm not supposed to talk about my new reality and this like amazing gift in my life. So much part
Yeah.
of who I am. And so I tell everyone, if you don't know this, you'll know it now, podcast audience. When it comes to suggestions or advice or even feedback, we take what we like and we trash the rest because not
Mm.
everything is true. So take what you think is helpful and leave the rest behind. I'm
I
all
love
about
that.
talking about my kid, and it doesn't bring me less business. It probably brings me more. I happen to consult now. I think that if I were in the corporate world still, working in a corporate environment, I'd be the same human and I would just have to find the place that fits me.
Yeah,
And
I will say too, I am a much better worker now that I'm a mom. Now, that's my experience. I have
yeah.
twins, which makes me, by the way, one hell of a negotiator. If somebody's
Huh.
got a disagreement and I need to neutralize and get to a better place, twins are good practice for that. I'm really good at multitasking. I'm very effective and efficient with my time. Doesn't mean I was less of a worker when I was childless, but I will say there are skills that parenting brings to the workplace, empathy, emotion, understanding. From a communication standpoint, I regularly tell people to tell me like they're 5. Tell me like my kids are 5. What are
Oh
you actually
yeah.
trying to explain? And explain it to a 5-year-old so we can cut through some of the jargon and get to the point. So I will say, there's parts of parenting that you can bring to the workplace proudly. Not all the time. Nobody wants to hear about, everything all the time, but yeah, bring your whole self. I'm
Yeah.
all for that. You asked me about supports. Number one, I have an incredibly supportive husband. He is in my corner. He is a freelancer, so that gives us a little bit of flexibility in terms of pickups and drop-offs and meetings and all of that. So I feel very, very fortunate to have that. I think from a workplace support, we talk about having other moms, other dads, having that network that you can chat with.
Yeah.
I actually have thought for a while, and I haven't managed to find the time to do this yet, but I always thought about an ERG for working parents would be kind of cool idea.
Yeah. I
Tips
know
and
some
tricks.
companies that do that if you want me to connect
Yeah,
with them after.
yeah, it'd be awesome. I do. I will start it at some point. I had this idea during the pandemic when we were all like, freaking out with kids on cameras and all that jazz.
Yeah.
But I think, one of the areas that I try to do now, I went to a new company when I returned from maternity leave, but I've known a number of friends, peers that have come back to the same company from maternity leave. Again, in Canada, it's a year, so different to potentially the 6 weeks to 3 months that you have in the US.
Yeah.
The entire company can change, and you're coming back as a new version of yourself to potentially a new company. And so I think acknowledging as workplaces that this transition is totally possible, but not easy, and making sure that the supports are there is really important. So I often mentor women that come back from maternity leave now, mentor in air quotes. I often have coffee and we regularly meet to say, like, how's it going? It's
Yeah.
okay. And so I think, making sure that there's supports for moms and dads, moms and moms, dads and dads, whoever the parents are that are, entering this new transition in life, it's really, really important to acknowledge that they're going through that. Just the same as, if you have aging parents, if you have other life, you and I talk about this. I think I steal this phrase from you. We're whole humans.
Yeah.
So we need to support each other in whatever we're going through, is my perspective. But for
Yeah.
sure, welcoming moms back can be an area of improvement, I think, in many companies.
Yeah. Let's take a giant step back for a second and talk about structures versus personal experiences. Is there anything that you're worried about in terms of taking a step in the wrong direction, either in the world or the local culture or government systems in relation to supporting moms at work? Like, for example, on my end, I'm concerned about the war on DEI turning into a pullback on inclusion efforts for women. And, we're talking about this the day we're actually recording this the day before International Women's Day, and seeing the different topics on LinkedIn. It's a lot less loud right now. Now, if this means that we strip out the performative aspects of inclusivity and instead focus on meaningful ways to help advance women, for example, and keep them in the workforce, for example, and keep growing them in their careers and eliminating that broken rung and all of those wonderful things that keep us behind, it could be good. And that will then be focusing on the right things. But I'm worried about disregard, like just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And here's an example. There's a woman in the US Congress who showed up to Congress to vote on the budget with her 4-week-old son because she was not allowed to vote remotely. People were cheering all over social media, talking about what a hero she is for showing up, and implied how terrible it was that she even had to do it. And to be clear on that, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. But no one was talking about how she was not allowed to vote at the end of her pregnancy either. Women who are that pregnant aren't allowed to fly. And since she wasn't allowed to vote remotely, she wasn't able to vote at the end of her pregnancy. Now, what might the impact to her voting record be on that front when she runs for reelection? What might the impact be to the people who wanting to continue to have her as their representative? To me, it feels a little performative to cheer on her heroism for showing up without showcasing the system that held her back, quite literally, from doing her job because of her pregnancy. So that's one example, but I know that there are so many more. For example, pulling back on efforts to push forward daycare programs or maternity leave and remote work or hybrid work and more. Return to the office will significantly impact mothers negatively. And I've been talking a lot these days with the women that I work with about things I mentioned earlier, like how am I supposed to be in the office when my kid gets off the bus at 3 and nobody's there because I can't get her into an after school program mid-year. And they
Mhm.
made this decision mid-year. And when I bring it up and I ask for grace, I'm told, figure it out. It's
Mm.
like, oh, so helpful. Thanks. Figure it out. That's super helpful. And we're known like for figuring it out and please and comms. It's like that's a superpower. So I'm going to pause there and say, what systems or structures do you think would be useful for companies or government to consider when thinking about supporting growth of women in the workplace? And is there anything you think we could consider in relation to our field in particular?
Yeah, I have a problem I'm gonna share. I don't have a solution, but let's put it out there and maybe we can come up with it. The one that I want to talk about is one, very grateful to have extended maternity leave in Canada. I'm primary breadwinner in my home, and many women these days are. But the system was built for, I think, generally when the system was built, it was more common for men to be the primary breadwinner and women to be potentially home taking care of the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say this because financially speaking, I live in Toronto. I have a heck of a mortgage. I make, I'm very privileged to make comfortable money. And then I all of a sudden went on a year-long maternity leave, which paid me very little money. And so, one, I'm thankful for the government structure that helps to support women while they're off on maternity leave. But it's a real reality that daycare in Toronto and housing in Toronto is stupidly expensive. And so financially, that model doesn't work for everybody, or it makes life a lot more difficult when you're off for a year to potentially 18 months. So that's one area. Again, I don't have the solution, but I think it's something that as women and as partners and men, we need to start talking about. Does it make sense for the partner or the man to be home with the baby if the woman is making more money? What does that look like? How do we make that possible? I don't know. The other one that you mentioned, which is always on my mind, is hybrid work. So while none of us enjoyed the pandemic, I will say there's a couple blessings for me that came out of it. I think we all see each other more as humans now from a workplace setting. You see the real people come through on Zoom calls and Teams calls. Two, hybrid work or pandemic life allowed me to be home with my kids. So prior to this, I was the standard career woman life where I woke up at 5 a.m., did all the things, left for the office probably around 7 a.m., finished my day 5:30, 6 o'clock, got home 7, saw the kids briefly, put them to bed, did all the things again, lather, rinse, repeat. And I
Mhm.
think the advantage of hybrid work, and I'm a big believer of hybrid, to be honest, I can appreciate how
Yeah.
you can work from home in many types of organizations, but I do think that there's coaching and visibility and interaction that hybrid brings. I also believe that as a communicator, working from home is needed many times when you're writing, when you're doing, deep thinking work. So all this to say, the advantage of hybrid work, it allowed me to be a mom to my kids in a way that I love. So I now walk my kids to school every morning. Can't always pick them up. We all know as communications people,
Yeah.
our days go sideways easily. But I really try and hold precious that time to walk them to work. I was in the office yesterday, love it, had all kinds of interactions, had those like collision moments where you solve problems in the hallway. And today
Mhm.
I'm gonna do a deep writing and thinking day. And I
Mhm.
think that enables me to throw a load of laundry in when I need to. It enables me to pick my kids up from school or maybe go to be scientist in the class or whatever, and also be a really strong, high-performing worker. So I think this hybrid piece is one that we really need to consider thoughtfully because many, many companies are going back to this 5 days in the office a week. And I think it's going to be a huge disadvantage to many. I don't think it's just a female thing. I think it's a retention loss for sure, but I think it's going to be a significantly higher disadvantage to women who
Yeah.
often have that share of household work, who often
Yep.
we talked about this. I have an amazing husband who does most of the cooking, who does the pickup and drop off. We're breaking some of the gender norms and we're learning
Yeah.
as we go. But I think for women who have, and I'm one of them, who have gained this amazing appreciation and amazing flexibility and balance in life to be a whole mother and a whole career woman at the same time, I'm worried we're going to lose that.
I am too. And I mean, you and I both know a woman who is the breadwinner. Most of the women actually that I work with are the primary breadwinners,
Yeah.
including myself. And we both know a woman who's a primary breadwinner, and her husband is the stay-at-home dad, and she works remotely actually.
Mm.
And yet she gets a lot of like, whenever she's showing up for an event, she gets a lot of like, oh, well, how'd you get out of staying, who's taking care of your kids? And how'd you get out of that, how'd you get your husband to take care of the kids this week? She's like, that's what he does every day. It's sort
Well,
of like, duh. And, we also know a ton of women who are trying to keep it all together, doing all the things all the times, which is why, I talk a lot about things like really crazy, wild things. I'm going to throw out a wild idea here
love it.
that might take like 50 years to ever take off. But I'm kind of like, hey, could we get house managers in our executive perks packages?
Love it.
Because we don't have parents that some of us don't have a stay-at-home parent.
Yeah.
And so, or flexible work.
Yes.
And it would be really great if we could have somebody come home and do meal prep for us while we're out and like do our laundry and change the sheets on our beds and run our errands and return the Amazon packages, which pile up at our
Mm.
entry where we say we're going to return this, we're going to return this, and we never do.
I'm looking at one right
Oh, is that
now.
just me? I'm like, is
No,
that
you're
just
not alone.
So like I have one and I pay for her obviously. Um, but wouldn't that be cool? Like it's just like a little thing. Like obviously another big thing is childcare.
Yeah.
Like childcare. I mean, what even when you think like after daycare that it's, oh, no problem. My kid's at school now. But I don't know what it's like in Canada, but everybody I talk to in the US, it's like at my child's school, they have a half day, one day a month. every single month. Then there's, school vacation weeks, there's summers off, there's holidays that might not match with, corporate holidays. There's all kinds of like, and then there's also, again, like the 3 to 5 gap.
Yeah.
And there's also the morning gap because for me, like my kid's school starts at 8:45. I
Yep.
don't, if I were to commute, where am I commuting to? Like I'm kind of in my own hybrid work style where I work from home and then I travel to my clients and I get to hang out with them there, but which is wonderful for me. But I think we just got to be open to that fact. And to be clear, I've said before that I think return to the office will disproportionately hurt mothers.
Mhm.
And I stand by that. I do think it hurts everyone who is used to it, who's found benefit from it, who wants it. But a return to the office 5 days a week, I think I said this to a man because he got really mad at me when I said it. And he said, I'm a man and I've benefited from return to the office and I don't have kids. Like, explain yourself. I was like,
Hmm.
yeah. What I'm saying is that remote work can help many people, but it helps mothers a ton. And to take it away from them means you might be reinstating some things that have held them back historically for since the old school corporate workplace was set up because the workplace hasn't changed in
No.
terms of like systems or structures, like when it starts in the beginning of the day, when it ends. And that's what many leaders are looking to return to in the corporate environment. And I think that they got to really look at who they're excluding when they do that.
I agree. I do not miss the days. There are certain days that I go to the office and I love it, but I don't miss the days of 5 days a week having to get up, do the hair, do the face, do the ironing, do the steaming, do the outfit picking, do all of that, then do the sometimes, I'm 10 kilometers from my office, but in Toronto traffic, it can take an hour in rush hour.
What's
Um,
kilometers for those of us who
Kilometers
are,
are what we call in Canada. You guys have miles, we have kilometers.
yeah, we're
So
metrically
that's like, I
challenged.
don't know, we'll have to figure this out. I think it's like 5.5 miles, maybe. It's a short
Yeah.
distance, say that.
Okay. So it's the same
And
for
and
me.
yeah, in Toronto traffic, it can be hairy, and so it can be an hour. Point being, there are days where I just want to get up and get my head down and get some work done.
Yeah.
And my husband and I have had this conversation. I work far more as a hybrid worker than I did potentially as a non-hybrid worker because I
Hmm.
get up and get to my computer and I get things done. And then I take a minute and I throw a load of laundry in or I, have a snack. And I come back and I get more done. It's 3 hours of my day that I get back if I'm working hybrid.
Yeah. In fact, we had Megan Witherspoon on the podcast a while back, and
Yeah.
she talked about how at her company they looked at the data to tell them about performance in relation to remote work versus in office work. And what they did was they analyzed performance data.
Mm.
And so they looked at the performance reviews and then they looked at who's in the office and who's working remotely. And they found that there was a slight difference. And the slight difference was in the favor of the remote workers. They had higher performance reviews than those who
Interesting.
were in the office. So if we're trying to fix performance, I just think like a lot of executives have this mindset of like, well, we need to fix the whatever it is. We need to fix collaboration. We need to fix innovation. We need to fix whatever. And they have no data telling them that's the thing that's they're going to fix,
Right.
that's how to do it. So I think that there's benefits to all three: remote work, in-person work, and hybrid work.
Mm.
And I think that we need to have a lot of flexibility in being thoughtful in new corporate systems to create a new corporate system that will work for the people, not
Yes.
work for a few people.
Yeah. I love that. And it can be flexible for everyone, not just moms, right? Like we've talked about that.
100%.
Yeah, like let's
I
make it
mean,
work for people.
I've also talked to, and I've covered this before in sort of a return to the office conversation. There was a Black woman who shared with me that working remotely helps her so much because when she's in the office, she feels like she's constantly like having to worry about how she's presenting herself. And are they, are they going to tell me that I should change my hair, or which she's been told before about like things about like, your hair is not professional enough, I think was the phrase.
Wow.
And like, how am I showing up? And like, don't be angry. Don't be the angry Black woman. And don't, you know what I mean? When someone says something mad to you, she's like, it's a lot easier to just like turn off your camera for a second and calm yourself down, or to go for a walk during a break, than
Hmm.
it is to like be in the office and constantly feel like I need to be on.
Right.
And not to mention the people that have disabilities.
Yep.
And I mean, there's just so much richness here about conversations about who it helps. And of course, like, hey, I was working hybrid in some sort of way when I was a single woman. And it
Mhm.
was great to be able to leave and go to my Zumba class.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, oh, I wouldn't be able to make this if I had the commute I normally have. Like,
Right.
that was just great. Being able to see my friends for
Yeah.
dinner because of like, it helps all of us. All I'm saying is that I think there's some exclusionary methods that happen when we try to return to the 1950s style workplace.
I love it. Let's bring it to today.
Andrea, this has been an amazing conversation. I thank you so much for joining and having our peers out there listen to this Comms and Moms episode. And I wonder if you have anything to share with our listeners as they think about this whole Comms and Moms construct.
Well, big thank you. I think one of the things we need to do as women, as good humans, is just have more of these conversations. We're not going to solve it all in one go, but having the conversation to get there is important. I hope I've left a message of two things. It is not easy to be a mom or in comms,
Yeah.
but it is possible. And, I think have the courage to have the conversations, have the courage to have the advocacy for what you need and how you succeed, and have the courage to step out and lean into a little bit of fear. I wouldn't be where I am today had I not made that very scary move to jump to a new company, a new career, a new role, a new level with twin babies. But I did
Yeah.
it and I'm here. And my husband and I are rocking it together. And we're breaking gender norms and we're showing people how it can be done. And we're showing people where it's not easy.
Yeah.
So all this to say, moms and comms, we're awesome. Let's do it. Let's do it together and prop each other up, help each other out.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Andrea as much as I did. And I want to share with you, she has one more tidbit to follow up with. When we finished talking, she wanted to share this story with me, and it was too good to pass up. And I think it relates to both our field and the women in it and motherhood. So here's one more little snippet from Andrea.
Okay, so here's a funny one as we talk about systems. I was 37 when I got pregnant, and the doctor told me that I was having a geriatric pregnancy. Then, as I was going through my fertility issues, obviously a hard time, I was told I had prematurely aging ovaries. Not cool. And then finally, when I went on maternity leave, my maternity leave was classed as a disability. So, yeah, I think words matter. We need a reframe.
Okay, we're not done yet. That was a really great story, I thought. Yeah, words do matter. I agree. And wouldn't it be so great if women were the ones who had named all of these things, like being pregnant when you're older, instead of calling it a geriatric pregnancy? I'm pretty sure it wasn't a woman who came up with that. Anyway, we are going to talk with a bunch more women. You're going to hear just some questions and some quick responses from several different women on topics related to being a mother in the communications field. So hang in there. We'll be right back after this brief message. I created Raise the Tide to help elevate our field and the women in it. It's part community, part coaching, part professional development, and part mentorship. It encompasses all of these things because it takes all of these things to rise in your career. I asked a few Raise the Tide crew members to share what their experiences have been like in the program, and here's what they had to say. What's one thing that's been surprising to you about Raise the Tide?
I honestly was surprised by how quickly I felt part of something really unique and special. Something that surprised me about being in Raise the Tide is just how much I feel seen. My crew holds up a mirror for me and even helps me see myself in ways that I haven't before. It's extremely validating and it's a pretty powerful experience.
I was really nervous at first about how would I gel with everybody else in the group and would we really get to know each other and would we really become close? It's amazing how suddenly they become your biggest group of cheerleaders and your biggest advocates and the ones pushing for you and rooting for you. And that was really surprising to me.
If you're interested in this program, head on over to taramcdonagh.com and complete the Raise the Tide form. A rising tide raises all ships, but we're not the ships. Together, we're the force of the tide, raising the ships for our entire industry.
Okay, now we're back. And I did promise I was going to share several voices, right? So I asked a bunch of women a bunch of questions related to communications and motherhood and the kind of connection there and what it's like being a woman in the corporate workplace. By the way, all of these women are in a corporate role. So they're working at a corporation and they are in a comms leadership or they're senior managers, directors, VPs, that kind of level. When I asked them these questions, they had a lot to say. So we pulled it all together for you and I hope you enjoy listening. What's one success story you can share about being a mother in this field?
I've been hired 8.5 months pregnant, which I think was really amazing to me because I was in a job prior to that I really wanted to get out of very badly. And I was facing a commute that was 2 hours each way. And I just didn't want to do that with a baby at home. I think a lot of people would say that women shouldn't interview when they're pregnant. I think I was 7.5 months pregnant by the time I even started interviewing for that role. They knew that I was pregnant right away. There was no hiding it. And at the end of the day, they just went with me because I was the best person for the job. I think it's really unfortunate when women take themselves out of the race. You can't be somebody's no for them.
When I was 8 months pregnant, I took a huge leap of faith and accepted an overseas position with a new company, and it was a leadership role. And we made the move when my son was 4 months old. And as a first time mother, I was navigating a new job, a new company, a new country, a new team. And at the same time, suddenly trying to understand my body and all the changes I was going through as a new mother. And I know it sounds cliche, but I got all the way to Singapore with this new role. And suddenly, my priorities really shifted. And I used to take my health for granted, and now I don't. Balancing motherhood, an intense career, taking care of myself really took deliberate work during that time. And it also required me to ask for support and accept some help for the first time in a way that I've never really been able to do before. When we moved back to San Francisco, I actually returned with a new sense of wanting to ask for more help and accepting more help from my family and friends. When we returned, my husband actually resumed his pilot career. So I'm now a solo parent for 2 weeks at a time and balancing a pretty intense role and trying my best to take care of myself. So I would say the success I have now is that I've just instead of a tech stack, I have my support stack, which means I deliberately moved downtown so that my commute would be shorter, assuming return to office was coming, and it did. I've brought in a part-time nanny who can pick up my son a few nights a week so that I can actually go to the gym. It's in my building. That was by design. I can go to gym and take care of myself and come home and cook while she gets him started for bed, and then I can take over the parenting with more energy. I also hired a personal trainer. She really helps me just with the routine. It's all async, she sends me my routine and I'm able to do it. And I've really just brought in different levels of support as needed instead of just being stuck in one particular way. I think it's always going to be a balance. This is not like your traditional 9 to 5 kind of job. Comms always feels like it's on because there's always something to react to or something to get ahead of. And I think as a mother, a parent, especially one that ends up solo parenting quite a lot, I've had to just get very rigorous about prioritization and making sure that I'm on that list. And that's really new for me, but something that I think makes me successful.
I think a lot of times women get nervous that if they're pregnant or a mom, that promotions are harder to come by. And while that might be true, I did have success getting a promotion when I was expecting my third child. So in between number 2 and 3, I did actually get a promotion. And part of that promotion was actually an extended, fully paid maternity leave package that is not was not standard in our company benefits, and I negotiated that as part of my promotion.
Have you ever questioned taking on certain roles or promotions or changing jobs because you were worried it would be too much to take on along with parenting? Tell me about that experience.
There was a time when I did question whether or not I should take on a certain role at my company after having my second kid. I just did not feel like I had the space that I needed to ramp up. I came back from maternity leaves and I felt like I was expected to get right back into the game in the same way that I had been before. And I was actually pretty hard on myself when I look back on it, asking, why I wasn't showing up in the same way. And looking back, I'm like, you were exhausted. You were getting 2 and 3 hours of sleep. You weren't able to do what you were doing before because you had a whole other human that relied on you for all hours of the night. So I think, thinking about it now, what I wish I'd had was a little more understanding for that transitional experience.
I was the first in my family to go to a 4-year university where I studied broadcast journalism. And against all odds, I landed an on camera position with an ABC affiliate as a multimedia journalist. It was everything that I had worked for and wanted. However, the physical and mental demands were something that I could not ignore when it came to thinking about starting a family. I carried heavy gear with me every day, and therefore working pregnant would only work so far into the pregnancy. I would then have to figure out what other role or stories I could potentially still produce while pregnant. Then I knew I would likely have a very short maternity leave. If you're not there, you're forgotten. And then when baby came, I knew I'd be running out at 2 a.m. to cover a fire, and stopping to breastfeed just wouldn't even be possible. Was this all something I could have figured out? For sure, and many do it every single day. However, it just wasn't my path, and it is hard to know that, like me, many women end up making the hard choice to change their career journey because of these decisions. I don't regret my decision, as it has turned out to be a great career. But nonetheless, there are communication positions that put women at similar crossroads, and it does break my heart.
What's it like working in a corporate environment in this field as a child-free woman?
To say the least, I was busy. I was expected to be on demand and accessible any time of day, no matter the project, no matter what was needed. It was exhausting, to say the least. When I was pregnant, there were comments made by my supervisor that I would bounce back quickly and be back to work. It was an expectation that I would be accessible the same as I was before I was pregnant, and to maintain the productivity as if I didn't just give birth.
Are others ever surprised that you're in the role you're in? And I mean, a leader position or an emerging leader position, getting into that role, and you're also a mom?
I have had some responses that people are surprised at how young my children are. And I've also had an experience where I've been traveling for work and people look at me dead in the face and say, "Who's watching your kids right now?" And the answer is that my husband is, because he's a stay-at-home dad, and that is the split that we have in our home. I think it was really weird and presumptuous of them to ask that, and I hope to not get that question 10 years from now.
What's the most biased thing that's ever been said to you about motherhood in your career?
The most biased thing that's ever been said to me about motherhood in my career, and it's actually said more often than one might think, but it's people say, go be with your kids. Kind of like a wrap up at the end of the day. I might be, closing out a call or something like that. And the person on the other end is like, okay, I don't want to take up more of your time. Go be with your kids. And it's interesting because my first notion isn't, oh, let me run away from this computer and go be with my kids. Don't get me wrong. I love them, but those kids are okay. I can still have other things in my life that need doing. And quite frankly, there might be a little more work that I need or want to focus on. My life outside of work doesn't revolve around my kids.
What do you wish they said to you instead, or wish that they knew, but maybe you didn't feel like you could share it?
I'm not terribly offended. I just do wish that people would instead say, all right, it's a long one or it's been a long one. Let's wrap it up. Have a good rest of your evening. And that does happen a lot. But the go be with your kids one kind of makes me itch a little bit.
What do you wish more people understood about your experience as a mom?
You do not get less with mothers. While we may be sleep deprived or run down from the morning routine before getting to our offices, we will show up and show out. Do not underestimate us and think that our minds do not have the capacity to prioritize your objectives over our parenting commitments. We have likely tackled 25 different impactful decisions before you have had your morning coffee. From the food we're feeding our kids to replying to that text that our VP just shot to us with an urgent request. We are multitaskers by trait, and while you may have a hard time fitting our schedule or frame of mind in a perfectly square box, please understand that we will always get our job done and do a pretty damn good job at that.
My experience as a mom, I'm a mom 24/7, always on. There are no breaks. My tolerance levels are different since becoming a mother. While I can tolerate more, I would say that I have established firmer boundaries than I had before becoming a mother. I don't carry other people's burdens in the working space like I used to since becoming a mom. And obviously, that's something that has been instrumental in being more successful now, making use of my time strategically and just not carrying anything that I don't need to carry. And I have motherhood to thank for that.
Has remote work or hybrid work helped you at all? How? And how do you think this benefits your employer?
So I would say that when COVID happened, I had an almost 1-year-old. And so I was really new into parenting. And while we were figuring it out and making it work, the switch to remote and now a hybrid model has helped me tremendously just manage school drop off and school pickup and, having dinner ready at a good time. And it's allowed me to work those things in throughout the day so that at the end of the day, I can spend more time with my kids. Whereas, when you're in office all the time, those things have to wait until you get home, which takes away time from the kids. And I will say that with a hybrid working model, a lot of times I do take calls, where my kids might be around. And especially if somebody's homesick or doesn't have school for a holiday, and it, never a problem for my job if that's the situation. So it's really become accepted that kids are part of your life and not to be, something that's not acknowledged in who you are.
Remote work allows me to be closer to my daughter's school. It allows me to be at home, closer to home. The time that I would spend on my commute to and from work allows me more time to be present as a mother. And to me, that is the most important aspect of my life. And the more that I can fill my cup being a mother and in motherhood, I believe that I'm a better associate at work. It boosts my morale, my productivity, and what I get done for the day. And knowing that I can work a little later at home and still make time to pick up my daughter from school or have time with my family, I look forward to that. So I'm going to automatically get more work done to be more productive and efficient, which that benefits my company overall. So I would say that
It allows me to be a mother first, an associate second, and anytime I can fill my cup, it works for the company too.
Hybrid work has been tremendously helpful to me as a parent. And my husband is an excellent partner when it comes to how we show up for our family and for our kids. But he also travels a lot. And with that, it just means that there's so much more that has to get done away from my desk. It's taking kids to karate and boxing. It's taking them to doctors and dental appointments. It's when they're sick and they're at home, and having the flexibility to be able to handle those things and also be trusted to get work done without having to sit in an office and do it has been phenomenal.
I was not a remote worker when I gave birth to my son, but when I gave birth to my daughter, I was a remote worker. Breastfeeding was easier. I was so much more bonded with her since I didn't have to leave her after 3 months. My mental health was significantly different. I did not struggle with postpartum depression or anxiety following the birth of my daughter, and it didn't impact my work any differently. I was promoted 3 times within 6 months after my daughter was born into some really big jobs, some really big roles. And I don't think that I would have done that if I had to go into the office every day, or I just don't think I'd be in the right headspace for it.
Has return to the office impacted you? How?
Return to the office has been difficult because I have to go back and refigure out how I better balance being a mom and being a full-time employee who now has to go into the office 3 days a week. So when I would have had 3 days at home and could have worked, you know, chores and laundry and running errands, I could have worked those into my day throughout the week. Now I have less time to do that. So I am reshuffling and trying to figure out what that looks like now.
What's one thing the corporate structure could do to make it easier for you and women like you to continue to grow in your career?
I am in a position of privilege because my husband is a stay-at-home dad and we have a really active family network. But I think more needs to be done for on-site daycare when people are expected to be hybrid or on-site. And I don't think that is just for mothers. My parents were both working until I was old when my brother was born. And I was in Montessori school at my dad's office, actually. He worked for Allstate or really close to his office. And I think childcare is really, really difficult for a lot of parents to manage. And the best way to support parents, well, is to have accessible daycare options that are subsidized.
What do you wish C-suite leaders knew about what it's like for you as a mom and a leader at your company? How could they better set up systems and structures to help you succeed?
One thing that I wish C suite leaders knew about, being in this position of being a parent and being a leader in the professional space is that it's not as easy as it may be for them in their own experiences. I think sometimes they forget about the support structures and resources that they have that not all of the rest of us do. And so taking it outside of their experience or even their expectations for what it might be like for others is really important to do. And I think the kinds of support that would be most helpful is kind of harkening back to when companies had like childcare benefits, if not, you know, facilities on site. I know that it's a cost and I totally understand that, but I also know as a mom, I'd be willing to pay my share if it meant that I'd have better access and ability to make sure that my kids are cared for and that I could get work done.
I wish C-suite leaders knew that as a mom, my intent is not to get out of working necessarily by having a hybrid model. My intent is to be a mom. And by allowing me to be fully present for my kids and as a mom, I'm going to show up as a better employee. And I think a lot of times C-suite execs just look at, how people flex their work hours throughout a day, and the assumption could be easily made that, people are trying to shorten a work day and not work 40 hours a week. And sure, that might be true, but I'm really just trying to be there for my kids so that I can feel good about being present and being a mom for them so that I can turn around and be a better employee at the end of the day. And so that's really what I wish C-suite leaders knew about how important it is, especially for working parents, to have this flexibility now in a working model.
Ooh, okay, that was a lot. So much richness to share from these women. And I really hope that you enjoyed listening in and that you heard some stories of yourself and heard some good advice too. So I will be with you again in 2 weeks on a new topic. And until then, if you have anything that you want to share about this topic or any other, please feel free to reach out. You can catch me at taramcdonagh.com. And if you don't follow Raise the Tide already, I would encourage you to do that. Go on over to LinkedIn, follow Raise the Tide, and you'll be able to see more content on what it's like for women in this field. So until next time, keep advising, my friends, keep advising.
If you're interested in working with me to advance your work and your team's reputation as critical business advisors, never order takers, check out taramcdonagh.com. Thanks for listening to the Communications Business Advisor podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please leave a rating or a review. It helps people find us, and we can't ignite a movement without sharing the message. See you next time, where we'll continue to do the work to elevate our field's reputation and elevate the careers of the people